It was dark. The streets were decorated with garlands of festive lights, but the windows of the nearest cafe were lit. The area in front of the establishment was empty of customers. The light from the windows foreshadowed a cozy atmosphere inside. 2 employees of the cafe were leaving work. They said goodbye to the manager with a smile. The green-eyed brunette wished Yoon-ju and In-ho a good journey, and she herself held a smartphone in her hands, standing at the cash register. Then the phone rang. It was President Chung Young-gae calling. Our heroine wondered what number it was already, and she didn't know if she should answer. For several days now, the girl had been constantly dizzy due to a slight fever. And again, she tried to cope with the unpleasant sensations that had rolled over her. She decided to finish work as soon as possible and go home to rest. And also to forget about the phone calls that were bothering her and to get a good night's sleep. But at that very moment, a car was approaching the establishment. The driver honked, slowed down, and parked. The man threw a cigarette butt out of the window. The driver clicked the lock and opened the doors for the boss. The tall, dark-haired man had an arrogant look. He was dressed in a 3-piece suit with a coat thrown over it. The doors to the cafe opened, letting in the late guests. The bell announced their arrival. The manager was finishing tidying up. Without even looking at the guests, she announced that the cafe was already closed. Looking up, the girl recognized President Chung Young-gae. She couldn't understand what this man was doing here. The guest glared, frowning, and asked Choi Joo-mi how much longer he had to mess around with her. The girl assumed that the visit was connected with what they had learned. Darkness clouded her eyes. Turning her head, she saw that 2 guards were on duty at the entrance. Chung Young-gae was indignant that she dared to be distracted by others when he was standing in front of her. The girl decided that he did not know everything yet, because that could not be. Choi Joo-mi said that if he came here because of the dinner party, she would tell his father. And he didn't have to show her such attention. The interlocutor asked what was about the child that was growing inside her. He made a pointing gesture with his hand towards her body. The girl hesitated with the answer, and then she did not understand how he could have found out. President Chung Young-gae angrily asked when she managed to sleep with someone while he was not around. The girl mumbled something in response. Chan pressed her, asking if it was his child. But having received only a silent challenge in the eyes, he decided that she was not going to answer. Chan Young-gae was merciless and cruel. Our heroine answered him negatively to his question, and assured that she did not really know who the father was. After all, since the moment of their intimacy, she had 2 partners. The man asked if Joo-mi had fun, and the girl brazenly asked if she thought she only did that with him. Yoonga assured that even though it was her, if it was a lie, he could get very angry. The partner doubted that she could be capable of changing partners so quickly. Joo-mi insisted that he was mistaken. But in any case, this child had nothing to do with him. It was not up to him to decide whether to get rid of it or give birth to it. So the man should just leave. Yoonga grabbed her sharply without further ado and dragged her along. The lady resisted and asked to wait. Soon the car door lock mechanism clicked, and Joo-mi was forced to find herself inside the car. In a dissatisfied voice, she asked where they were taking her. The ex-partner asked her not to worry, assuring her that he could not do anything bad to a pregnant woman. Yoonga was smoking a cigarette. The smoke from it was coming through the open door into the car. It made the girl feel sick. The man stubbed out his cigarette with his sock in displeasure. He said it was simply unbearable. The ex held out a handkerchief to Joo-mi. She refused, assuring him that there was no need. But he insisted. The girl covered her face while squeezing her stomach with her other hand. And Yoonga, observing her behavior, thought that she had not intended to get rid of the child from the very beginning. The man took the passenger seat next to our heroine. She asked not to worry, assuring that she would not ask her partner to take responsibility for the child even if she decided to give birth. Yoonga called her by name. The girl turned away from him. The ex-husband asked arrogantly who would want to marry her. He ordered the driver to go buy something to eat that was safe for pregnant women. And he said that it would not be worth it to starve before the baby was born. The assistant answered briefly that he understood everything, and he got out and slammed the car door. Joo-mi continued to insist that she didn't need anything. The ex was twirling a cigarette in his hands. Putting his hand on the girl's head, Yoonga told her in a commanding voice to get some sleep, and then he closed her eyelids with his hand. Our heroine asked herself how it all turned out like this. The price of one night turned out to be too high. That time, sweat was pouring from the partner's body onto Choi Joo-mi. The partner was rude to her. Yoonga did not expect such passion from a quiet and modest girl. It seemed as if they were bound to meet anyway, as if they were bound by some fatal, vicious bond. When they met again, he was surprised that the girl did not run away, although she had enough time to do so. It seemed to Yoonga that the lady wanted to play with fire. To Jumi, meeting him seemed like something between coincidence and inevitability. Anything was possible. Some time ago, it was a clear moonlit night. The lights of the skyscraper were on, and there was a turbulent life outside its walls. The girl cut herself a piece of meat. After a short snack, she took a sip of red wine. Yoonga sat down in front of her. Our heroine asked herself why he had come. It was already 10 o'clock in the evening. She had already thought that he would not show up at all. Jumi was upset. The partner was 3 hours late, but he behaved as if nothing had happened. She thought it was rather strange to have dinner together so late. And even the fact that a man was just sitting in front of her was also rather unusual. Yoonga was the president and successor of Usan, the largest gangster organization in Korea. And even here, on peaceful business, he brought his men as if to a fight. They habitually shifted at the entrance, not taking their eyes off the boss. Jumi took another sip of wine. She thought it would have been better if he hadn't come here at all. Then she could have justified herself to her father that she had waited in vain all evening. The girl invited Yoonga to drink wine with her, assuring him that the drink was quite good. The man asked her in surprise how she was able to drink wine in such a situation. Jumi asked him again. He said that he had given her enough time to escape. The brunette, with an evil glint in his eyes, asked if the lady really wanted to play with fire too. The girl reminded President Yoonga that they had met some time ago. It was then at dinner. A few days ago, Jumi met him at a dinner party. Her father invited her there. And then the girl thought that it was just a meal at the same table and nothing more. But no one knew that the meeting would be repeated in such a situation. Our heroine's father was also involved in crime. Therefore, the girl never had any hopes of a normal marriage. Jumi said that she could never go against her father's will if he decided to. It was easier to do as he wanted, so that he would leave her alone. Yoonga lit a cigarette. He summed up that the girl wanted to get married so that her father would leave her alone. The lady hesitated and began to assure Mr. Yoonga that this was not what she wanted to say. He was surprised that they called him by name, although he had not introduced himself. The girl assured that she understood his position perfectly, and she assured that she herself intended to tell her father that she had been rejected, which, in general, was not a lie. The brunette assured that everything was not so simple. The lady introduced herself as Choi Jumi, that she was 28 years old, that she had dropped out of university after completing her bachelor's degree, and now she owned the Boncha Cafe. The girl stood up and said that she intended to leave him, and wished him a good dinner. But the brunette asked why she gave in. Yumi assured that they would never see each other again anyway. After all, she considered herself rather boring for someone like President Yoonga. Shaking the ashes of his cigarette into a plate of lobster, the man assured her that it was definitely not up to her to decide whether they would meet again. The girl was a little taken aback, but having regained her composure, she assured him that she would go anyway, and wished him a pleasant time. But the brunette waved his hand at his guards. One of them notified the boss that a car was waiting downstairs. President Yoonga said that was enough, and he ordered them to leave and send the others home as well. And he barked towards Jumi, causing her to freeze. She was a little confused. The brunette reminded her that she was going home, and throwing on his coat, he ordered her to follow him. The girl assured him that she could have gotten there on her own, but Yoonga countered that she herself had wished him a pleasant time. Our heroine tried to understand what was wrong with him. After all, he himself was late for 3 whole hours, and now he was going to take her home. The car was parked at the entrance to the establishment. Jumi made another attempt to leave, assuring that she would get there better herself. Yoonga irritably assumed that she was waiting for the car doors to be opened for her so that she could get in herself. Soon the car was already rushing along the night roads of the city. The girl who was sitting in the back seat was extremely uncomfortable in the company of Mr. President. That's why she was going to go home alone. Jumi asked to stop the car near the K Company building in Hanam-dong. It was an area where the rich lived. The brunette drove silently, and our heroine reasoned in the passenger seat. All this was on her father's orders. But she did not consider a relationship with a gangster the best option. She thought it might be for the best, although there were few people a gangster's daughter could get along with, let alone a mafioso. For her, love was an unaffordable luxury. The brunette glanced sideways at Jumi. She sat with her head down. The clock read at 10:30 when she received a message on her smartphone, notifying her of Young Hyun Sunbae's upcoming wedding. The weather was sunny and clear, At that time, our heroine's cafe was open, attracting potential customers passing by with a menu of their plated dishes on display. Our heroine answered the caller that she was busy at the moment. She promised to come during the week, and now it was the weekend, she had work. They told Jumi on the phone that everyone around her was handing out invitations to weddings and engagements, and she was the only one making coffee on weekends. The girl told her mother that that was why she tried to go to that meeting. The woman assured her daughter that she herself felt uneasy about all this, and she blamed her husband for introducing her to such a person. She was indignant that her husband was a gangster, and then he found a son-in-law who was also one. Jumi remembered that arrogant and rude man who didn't leave others the opportunity to decide anything for themselves. The daughter assured that nothing had happened after that time, and she asked her mother not to worry about her too much. She thought that it would be better to go to the meeting that the hospital director's son wanted to organize, and she was indignant that her father could drag their precious and only daughter into this. Jumi interrupted, saying that a client had come to see her, and having promised her mother that she would call back, she disconnected the call. The brunette who came up to the cash register greeted him and ordered a warm latte. The manager was taking orders today, and she asked if the client was planning to drink the drink here, so that she could serve him according to the standard. The guy in glasses nodded silently in response. Jumi said that she would prepare the order now. Soon the cup with a lid and a straw stood on the tray. The manager said the standard phrase, and wished them a bon appétit. The assistant informed the manager that this guy was a frequent visitor to their establishment. Jumi wondered if he was a regular customer. Our heroine felt something different from this guy. It wasn't like from a regular customer. The coffee shop employee assured that every time this guy came in, he sat right in front of the counter and just looked, and only at the director. The coffee shop guest sipped his drink, keeping his eyes on Jumi. The assistant assured that he was looking so intently, as if he was boring into her with his gaze. The boss suggested that it might have seemed that way, and suggested not to rush to conclusions. But then a notification rang on the smartphone. Caller Henson asked if she would be attending Jong Hyun Sunbae's wedding today. Our heroine silently and quickly typed the answer on the keyboard. She told the employees that she would not be here after noon today, and ordered them to close it themselves before leaving. The newlywed couple happily accepted the guests' congratulations with a smile. Two guests were surprised at what kind of weddings they had these days. The brunette asked her friend to look at how this upstart smiled, and she assumed that she was glad that she had taken away someone else's man. She assumed that the bride knew about the arrival of Jumi among the guests. But our heroine did not agree with this formulation, because she did not consider that guy to be hers. A friend reminded her that Sunbae had liked Jumi once, and everyone knew about it. But Yumi had interfered in their relationship and ruined everything. But she believed that this fact was the end of her story with the guy. Henson believed that the problem was in the worldview. After all, Jumi believed that there was an objective reason for absolutely everything. That is why the person who was considered her friend dared to do this to her. The girl asked to change the subject. After all, there was nothing to be done now. And she asked who could want to marry a gangster's daughter. The banquet hall was noisy. Guests were chatting and enjoying themselves. The tables were laden with snacks and drinks. The friend assured that in her opinion something should have happened here after Jumi's arrival, and she was surprised by her calm. But she replied that she had responded to the invitation purely out of politeness, and she thought that if she hadn't come today, rumors would have spread that she was jealous. Henso was surprised by her pure thoughts, and she asked how it was possible not to be angry watching this. Jumi assured that she wanted to make sure to see the young man happy, and having made sure today that he was with another woman, she felt better, and now she felt that she could figure everything out. The friend supported her interlocutor and advised her to forget about Jong Hyun Sunbae and Cho Yumi. She assured that there were still plenty of wonderful men in this world, and she asked if Jumi wanted to meet one of them. Henson asked how the recent meeting went, but the brunette assured that she only went there for her father. The friend suggested to end the boring conversations and start drinking. She ordered Jumi not to even think about getting ready to go home early today. She ordered another martini from the bartender. But turning her head in his direction, she noticed out of the corner of her eye the same guy who had come into the cafe. The brunette, noticing that they were looking at him, immediately turned away. Henson noticed her friend's confusion and asked what had her so worried, assuming she had seen someone she knew. Jumi insisted that she had imagined it, and suggested that she had become too sensitive because of this wedding, and that was why she had imagined things. The friend said that her boyfriend suddenly called her and that's why she had to leave urgently. She said goodbye until next time. Jumi assured that she was already pretty tired and was getting ready to leave. Our slightly drunk heroine walked down the street alone in her shoes. Her legs were still tangled. The clicking of her heels could be heard along the street. And following her at a distance in sneakers was the same guy who had been in the cafe that morning, and then at the event in the evening. At some point our heroine saw something and she turned around abruptly. But no matter how hard she looked, she still saw no one on the deserted street. The silence of the nighttime was not disturbed by anything. Swallowing the lump in her throat from nerves, Jumi told herself reassuringly that she must have imagined it. For some time now she had felt an unpleasant gaze on her back. This had happened in her past. When the girl was studying at the university, a man who was fighting for power with her father ordered to threaten her, and now Jumi couldn't let go of the feeling of being looked at. Just like that time. Then, Young-hyun Sunbai was nearby. Stopping near one of the cars under the house, our heroine froze. She decided to check if she imagined it or if she was being followed. Jumi concentrated her gaze on the rearview mirror of the car, and she saw the same young man there, wearing glasses and a green hoodie under his jacket. Darkness covered the girl completely, and she began to tremble slightly. Then someone called her by name, which in its unexpectedness caused her to shudder. Mom took Jumi by the shoulder and asked why her daughter was so scared. The woman scolded her for not answering her calls and asked what she was doing that she was going home so late. Jumi asked her mother where she had come, and why she had left the house at such a late hour. She said that she wanted to talk. That was the purpose of her visit. The mother asked if the girl had been drinking. She answered affirmatively, adding that only a little. There was a suggestion to go inside because it was getting cold outside towards night, and the wind was chilling to the bone. Soon, amber tea was poured for two in porcelain cups on the table in the living room. Mom took a sip of the hot tonic drink and asked Jumi how it all went. The girl asked what she was talking about. The question was about a date. The girl asked how many times she had to repeat herself, and she assured that they had just talked and gone their separate ways. The mother was pleased with what she heard. She assured that she had arranged a meeting for the weekend, and she told Jumi to go there without fail. The girl asked with whom exactly. He was the eldest son of the hospital director Henson, and if the woman had known that her husband would do this, she would have made an appointment even earlier. Our heroine was indignant, but her mother was against Jumi having a husband like her father. She assured that she wanted a quiet life, and she considered it unnecessary to sacrifice her only daughter for the sake of business. But she assured me that this was not what she wanted to talk about. Jumi asked her mother what the hospital director himself thought about such a relationship. Frowning as if from a headache, our heroine asked what they would do when they reported everything to their father. And her mother suggested not telling him anything for a while. She assumed that anything could happen, and suddenly a relationship would emerge. Then she could give her father an ultimatum. Her mother, for her part, promised to put in a good word. Jumi said she was tired and wanted to rest. Her guest herself realized that it was already so late, looking at her watch. Having promised to call each other, they said goodbye. Our heroine was soon already lying in bed. She could not understand why this day seemed endlessly long to her. There was a strong wind blowing outside, and the girl had a strange premonition that the coming winter would be especially long and cold. On a weekend evening, our heroine was again at the building where her last blind date took place. Walking through the hall on the first floor, she asked herself why the meeting was scheduled in this particular hotel. It seemed like some kind of obsession or déjà vu. The feeling that everything went wrong from the very beginning did not give me any peace. The girl reassured me that it would just be dinner and that would be the end of it. A business card was held out to Jumi, and Lee Taeju smiled widely as he introduced himself. He was a tall, brown-eyed young man with a childish expression on his face. His brightly colored accessories emphasized his simple nature. Lee asked his interlocutor if he had understood correctly that she was Choi Jumi, and assured him that he knew a little about her from her mother. The girl absent-mindedly confirmed her identity, and politely responded to the greeting. The interlocutor, without stopping smiling, asked if the girl had arrived safely. She concluded about him, an ordinary normal person, who also came here with a specific purpose. Her mother wanted to become related to the hospital director, who in turn wanted power in Usan. So today's meeting was not much different from the previous one. Lee claimed he was surprised. He said he had heard about Jumi's beauty, but he hadn't thought it would be that beautiful. The girl smiled modestly without looking up. The girl was pleased in such an environment. She was immersed in her thoughts. The interlocutor misinterpreted her silence and began to assure that his words were not simply out of politeness. And Jumi continued to compare men. And compared to the other one who was here a week ago, Lee acted natural and friendly. Unlike that, he didn't keep himself waiting alone for long. And when the food arrived, he didn't treat it like trash or an ashtray. Our heroine asked herself why she was constantly thinking about that day. And catching herself on this, she tried to concentrate on the interlocutor in front of her. Lee said he was glad that Jumi wasn't offended and suggested they start eating. Over dessert, the man told them that he had a younger sister. But she didn't care about him, so his partner won't have to worry about how to improve relations with his relatives. Jumi was about to finish her coffee and leave. Lee assured his interlocutor that he had heard that she had a coffee shop in Hanam-dong. Then what she saw horrified the girl and her pupils narrowed. The employee of the hall saw off Director Chan accompanying him. Among the companions was her father. The entire group of people, accompanied by a restaurant employee, inexorably approached our heroine's table. Jumi remembered with horror the conversation with her mother that there could have been a scandal. That's why she asked her father not to tell her anything for now. And she asked herself why this was happening now. Our heroine did not take her eyes off President Yunga. Lee, seeing the confusion in his interlocutor's eyes, asked what was happening to her. She assured him that everything was fine. Chan Yunga silently frowned and deliberately walked as close as possible to the table of the girl and her interlocutor, thereby demonstrating his presence to her. Soon the entire delegation passed by. Jumi covered her face from the emotions that overwhelmed her. Lee was worried about her and asked what had happened. And our heroine had an internal dialogue, that she would never have thought that a date in the same hotel could lead to such a problem. In fact, she did not cheat on anyone and did not owe anything. But the girl could not understand why her heart was beating so wildly in her chest, and her hands were shaking and clutching the hem of her dress. Jumi wondered what her father was doing here, and she realized that she was in trouble. She felt like a shrimp in a whale fight. Then a notification signal sounded. The screen showed an order from her father to finish quickly and then come to him. The girl knew that her father was not known for his politeness. Getting up from her chair, Jumi suggested finishing for today. Mr. Taeju assumed that his interlocutor had something urgent. The girl replied that something had happened at home. Lee was asking permission to call her later, and there was anxiety on his face. Jumi, saying goodbye, reminded the man to be careful on the way home. Our heroine walked slowly along the familiar corridors of the hotel as if to an execution or a run. The heels of her shoes clicked on the tiles, inexorably bringing the hour of an unpleasant conversation with her father closer. Looking at the phone screen, our heroine asked herself what she was doing at all. Jumi stopped abruptly. The one who had been following her like a shadow for some time stopped just as abruptly. Our heroine, realizing this, froze in place. Darkness covered her consciousness. They were breathing down her neck, and she did not even dare to turn her head back from fear. Having lost control of herself, the girl accidentally dropped the smartphone from her hands. The gadget fell to the floor with a dull sound. Jumi herself fell to her knees next to him, clutching her chest. She wondered who the man was and what he was threatening her with. A little later, having come to her senses and standing on her feet, our heroine approached her father's office. There were 2 guards standing there. The chief was informed that his daughter had arrived. When the girl entered the office and saw that Chan Yunga was sitting at the table, Dad invited Jumi to sit down. She was convinced that it was the same man. The father assumed that Jumi was having dinner with a friend, and he informed her that he had ordered her favorite wine. The girl could not calm down that a regular customer, the one she had met in the restaurant and just now in the hotel, was the same person, and she assumed that stalking was targeting her. It would be difficult to convict such a person. Even if there were 1,000 pieces of evidence, the punishment would be minimal. When Hyesung talked about it, our heroine wasn't too worried, and she wrote it off as a coincidence. The girl assumed that she was overreacting because she had encountered this before. She remembered how her father scolded her and told her to do what he said. In exchange for admitting that his daughter was having a hard time, he promised to give her a cafe or a hotel in Hanam-dong, so that the girl would become independent. Dad had given her permission, but he could also have ordered her to go home. This stranger had only been following her for a few days, and Jumi was not herself. She needed to be sure, but our heroine winced. Not hearing the question, lost in thought, Mr. Chan assumed that she was on good terms with this friend. The girl confirmed that they got along. The father was angry with his daughter, and Jumi calmly replied that they just came to have dinner. She had no idea that she would meet someone she knew here. Turning to the president, she asked how he was doing, and assured him that she was going to contact him later. The man raised a glass of whiskey to his mouth and smiled. Jumi liked his dimples. He usually didn't smile, but only slightly raised the corners of his lips. That's why it was impossible to see the dimples on such a cold face before. Although Chan really had everything, Mr. President assumed that the girl had already been drinking with a friend and that she had enough alcohol for today. But the girl handed him a glass and thanked him for the wine. Yoonga asked Yumi again if she was glad to see the young man, and he noticed that she had had quite a few interesting meetings. The father hugged his daughter and said that she was very shy, usually very quiet and taciturn. The president put out his cigarette and replied that he disagreed. He did not consider the girl shy. He stood up abruptly, getting ready to leave. Dad asked Jumi to get up quickly because the guests were leaving. Later, they all went outside together. The girl felt very uncomfortable with them. She told her father that she would go first, but he got very angry and said that he had something to say to her. The people seeing the guests off wished them a good journey. The girl was very angry with her mother for listening to her and coming to the meeting in secret. Mr. Chan opened the window of the car and offered to give Jumi a lift. He assured her that they were on the same route. The girl was very surprised and at the same time happy. But the young man added that Director Choi was here and so there was apparently no need for that. The car suddenly started and began to drive away, but the girl asked to stop. She replied that since it was on the way, she asked to give her a lift and drop her off where she had been last time. The young men's eyes met. The girl immediately got into the car. She thanked the man for giving her a ride, but he objected that it was a very stingy thank you. Jumi wondered why he decided to help. He couldn't get drunk from a couple of glasses of whiskey. They looked at each other in silence. The girl thought that his firm gaze was filled with emotions. She became very curious why, and she decided to ask about it out loud. The president was surprised and replied that he himself did not know. Jumi realized that the man immediately realized that she was on a date and that she did it in secret from her father. And even if it was without enthusiasm, maybe it was just her guess. After all, this indifferent man had no reason to help. At the first meeting, he kept us waiting for 3 hours. And after that, he acted very pleased and put us in an awkward position. But now he acted so nobly. Our heroine asked to stop the car. She thought that she would rather go home and go to bed. But Mr. Yoonga said that the skirt was under his foot. The girl took it out with a timid movement and thought about why it was stuck now. Jumi got out of the car, thanked them for the ride, said goodbye and reminded them to be careful on the road. Approaching the house, she dialed the code for the entrance door. As she climbed the stairs, the girl thought that she was very nervous. Even just being near that man made her shake. She thought about what to say to her father. Suddenly losing control of herself, she dropped the phone on the steps. The device rolled down. Jumi looked at something lying on the floor below. She was upset that everything was going wrong for her that day. But hearing a rustle, the girl froze. She realized that someone was upstairs. She just didn't know what to do, run or call the police. And the phone with a cracked sensor screen vibrated downstairs. Then our heroine began to feverishly think about what to do. She could go home to her parents, but first she still had to answer the phone. Having picked up the phone, she planned to leave the building. Jumi hurried down the steps, bending down to grab the phone. Having thrown open the entrance doors, the girl hurried to jump out in order to be seen. She loudly called for help. The director's car was still standing with its headlights on. Our heroine hurried to run there. The girl furiously knocked on the side window of the car. She begged the president to open it for her. The door lock clicked. Yoonga raised his cold gaze to the girl, who was scared to death. Jumi insisted that there was someone in the entryway. She assured that she had been under surveillance for several days. Whining and crying, the girl said that she had run into that guy recently at the hotel, and even earlier at the bar. She grabbed Yoonga by the lapels and squeezed them emotionally. And she said, almost stuttering, that when she was walking home, someone rustled on the stairs above. The director was fed up with her hysteria. He understood the problem, and that was enough. He grabbed Jumi by the hands and tore her away from his clothes. Yoonga took the brunette firmly by the hand and led her along. The girl asked where they were going. He asked dryly where she lived. Our heroine thought that the man simply took her hand. But for some reason she suddenly felt a strange relief. The brunette commanded to open the door. The code lock of the entrance hall squeaked thinly. The hinges creaked. Opening the doors, Yoonga was the first to enter. Our heroine stood at the threshold in complete confusion, turning his head in different directions. The guest began to examine everything with the particular care of a gangster. Pointing to the ceiling, he asked Choi Jumi how long it had been there. The girl followed his gaze and understood what he was talking about. She replied that the fire alarm had always been there, but the gangster assured her that she was wrong. There was a small red light inside the device. It looked like the real thing, but it was actually to the right. Hyunga climbed in and removed the suspicious device. The girl guessed that it could have been a hidden camera in that case. The gangster said that since there were no signs of a break-in, the camera was most likely installed yesterday or today. He assured that he had found nothing else suspicious. The girl asked whether the villain could have known the code to her apartment. Yoonga answered in the affirmative. Our heroine imagined that perhaps today this strange man could open her door. Her hands began to tremble. She was going to look up how to file a police report on her phone, but she couldn't hold the device and it fell to the floor. The sensor screen was covered in small cracks. Yoonga picked up the smartphone and looked at it appraisingly. The girl extended her hand, asking for her thing back. She was going to call the police station. The gangster clenched his fist so tightly that pieces of plastic flew from the device, rendering it completely unusable. Jumi was horrified and asked if he had broken her phone what she had said about calling the police in front of the gangster. The brunette remained silent in response, only pressing his lips tightly together. Hyunga said that he couldn't stand things that irritated him. The girl suggested that he leave if that was the case, and she was already escorting him out from behind. But then she suddenly changed her mind, and she started apologizing. Jumi assured that this was not what she meant, but whatever this psycho was going to do to her, it should not concern Jang Yoonga. After all, it was not his problem and responsibility. The gangster asked her to explain calmly whether someone was really following her. The girl tried to take the remains of her phone from his hands. Hyunga assumed that it would have been much quicker and more effective for the girl to turn to her father for help than to these losers and lazy people. Our heroine was in a stupor. The guest asked irritably, was it really her hobby to make people ask twice? The girl believed that if her father interfered, it could only worsen the situation. After all, he didn't like the fact that Jumi left home, and upon learning about it, he would immediately demand that she return home. So she hesitated how to say it. Yoonga smiled broadly and put forward his proposal. The first thing he did was throw her broken phone over his shoulder. Then he said that they needed to find one person. Soon the gangster was already calling someone. He explained that an unknown person had just left the Yanil building, and he asked to find out everything about him in detail, down to the smallest detail. After all, this person had installed a camera marking the apartment. Yoonga, interrupting the conversation on the phone, asked Jumi where she had seen that strange guy. The girl began to feverishly remember, replaying the events in her head. Our heroine didn't know what could happen, but just in case she recorded information about that guy from the surveillance cameras, as well as the time. But she didn't think she would give these recordings to the president. The gangster asked his interlocutor to call him as soon as he found that guy. He ordered him to grab the bastard by the throat and bring him to him. Darkness covered our heroine completely, and noticing the bestial gaze of the brunette, she shuddered and hiccuped nervously. Yoonga handed her a piece of paper with notes about that guy. The girl looked dumbfoundedly at the gangster, then at the piece of paper. It was strange that he threw away the phone, but returned the note so carefully. Our heroine simply could not understand this man. Yoonga turned away and headed for the door, but the girl grabbed him by the sleeve and asked him to wait. Looking imploringly into the eyes of Choi Jumi, she asked the gangster if he had already left. The girl said that the guest had just arrived, and she was surprised that he had already left so quickly. The brunette assured that he had not loved that kind of flirting. Jumi assured that she wasn't flirting at all. She was just afraid that the man could come back at any second. The gangster asked her if she wanted him to guard her all night. Our heroine was surprised at herself. After all, she subconsciously considered him safer than that stalker. Wiping her eyes from tears, she assured that she had not meant that at all. Yoonga turned to the door, making sure it was closed. Then he went to the kitchen and opened the refrigerator to find an alcoholic drink. Having quickly and skillfully uncorked it, he deftly poured red wine into the glass. And bringing it to Juma, he ordered her to drink it. Our heroine timidly took the glass by the stem and drained it to the bottom, sip by sip. The girl handed it over and asked for more. She asked for forgiveness from Mr. President. Jumi assured him that since he had agreed to help her, it would be worth keeping everything a secret from her father. And she claimed that it was harmful for him at his age to worry about trifles. Another glass was being filled with wine. The girl looked at Yoonga with a tired look and asked him to stay at least until she finished drinking. The gangster asked again. Yumi assured him that it was not because she was scared. The girl said that Yoonga had decided to help her out anyway, but he insisted that he hated wasting time. Our heroine noticed that he had helped her anyway, but he hadn't let her call the police, so now all the responsibility lay with him. The gangster said that she irritated him. Chon Yoongae was furious, and he asked her opinion, whether he had any important things to do besides guarding drunk girls in their apartments. Jumi assured that she was honestly scared, and she claimed that something similar had happened to her once before. The gangster chuckled and asked if the girl thought he was dangerous. The girl, without raising her eyes, said that he was not a very good person. But at least they were acquainted, drag with a friend, and he was on pretty good terms with her father. Yoonga philosophically voiced that there was nothing more dangerous than carelessness. The girl asked again. He told her to drink the wine and not pay attention to him, and Jumi obediently drained the glass in large gulps. Soon the last drops of wine were drained from the bottle. This was already the 4th bottle drained. The drunk girl was lying on the sofa. She was barely moving her tongue as she tried to sort things out with Chon Yoonga. Jumi asked if everything was allowed to the president, and if so, then she was also the president of her cafe. The brunette tried to reason with Choi Jumi, and at least help her sit up, but she resisted and told him not to dare hurt her. The brunette lifted the girl up so that she could see his face and began to sober her up. And he said that if she didn't come to her senses right away, he would undress her and take her out naked into the street. In fact, the girl deep down regretted going to her ex's wedding, and now she thought that she shouldn't have gone there. She told her friend the opposite, but that didn't mean it didn't hurt at all. Jumi thought that she had lived somehow wrong. She was already 28 years old, and looking back, she realized that she had never done things her way. The girl couldn't even choose love, although it was available to all people in the world, and now it won't be the way she wants. The brunette asked not to do anything that they would both regret later. Jumi staggered and said that all she had ever done in her life was feel sorry. Now she was not going to do that anymore. The gangster held the girl so that she would not fall. Our heroine, feeling herself in safe hands, pressed herself against his chest. Soon she heard his heartbeat, and she was surprised that this man had one too. The brunette pushed Choi Jumi away. She asked why his chest was so big. Restraining himself, the guest asked her to come to her senses as soon as possible. The phone rang. The director clicked the button and put it to his ear to answer it. At this point, Jumi squeezed his torso, trying to maintain balance. The man told the caller that he was busy at the moment. The girl looked at Yoonga. His face was as usual, but he seemed surprisingly relaxed, and he continued to answer the questions briefly. Our heroine assumed that her guest was drunk too. She so wanted this mask to fall off someday, and she saw it. The man said he was annoyed. Jumi concluded that sometimes his facial expression would change if he was angry. Yoonga warned that the girl was crossing the line. She asked him to check if the door was locked properly. Grabbing the sleeve of the already departing gangster, the girl began to thank him. She pressed herself against the guest again and felt his warmth. Jumi suddenly remembered her ex. That Sunbae had the same warm cheeks. Our heroine decided that this was the warmth she had been waiting for so long. No one would take away what belonged to her anymore. The girl did not want to let her father or anyone else influence her life. Jumi began to cry and beg not to leave her alone. She decided not to miss the warmth this time, and she began to kiss Yoonga passionately on the lips. Soon her partner succumbed to her emotions and began to respond in kind. The brunette asked what the girl knew to act like that. He smiled at her pleading expression. Jumi just shook her head. The gangster asked what she wanted him to do, and warned that such jokes would not work on him. The man clenched his teeth, trying to cope with the temptation, and he considered that he was drunk, since he succumbed to such a clumsy provocation. The girl fidgeted, and said that she didn't like it when they were wasting time. The partner grabbed her ankle. Only then did she remember that she had twisted her foot when she was running away from the stalker down the stairs. Jumi asked him to react faster. The brunette clenched his teeth, trying to control himself, but then he quickly and roughly began to take off his shirt. He said that it could all be attributed to the fact that they were both drunk, and simply gave in to a crazy impulse. The girl, continuing to caress him, assured him that nothing terrible would happen if they had a little fun today under the influence of alcohol. Soon he was already in the lead. Their bodies were no longer controlled by the brain. The girl was so hot that it seemed to her partner that she would explode. It turned out that such a passionate person hid herself behind a mask of quiet and modest, which her father knew, who did not know his daughter at all. Biting and kissing further heated up the couple's emotions. At the last moment, Yoonga thought that he was definitely not himself. Everything was mixed up in his head, as if he had lost control of himself, and he could no longer resist this animal impulse. The girl asked him to hold her hand. The gangster squeezed it below the wrist. He told himself that he could not cross the line anymore, and he forbade himself to feel emotions. Yoonga assumed it could be pity or compassion. He considered emotions dangerous, especially if it was a one-night stand. But he couldn't understand why his heart was so hot and pounding. It was after 1:30 in the morning. Everything happened like madness, spontaneously and brutally, like a beast. Jumi was exhausted. Her vision was blurry and swimming, but the gangster said he was still full of strength. The man was used to always commanding everyone, but his orders did not work on this woman. She, like an evil creature, contradicted all his words, but at the same time got what she wanted. And things that were impossible in his world happened to him when she was around. Yoonga asked her not to think of blaming him for anything when she came to her senses. The girl suggested stopping. The brunette said that he wasn't done yet, and with a predatory grin he continued caressing. Already in the morning, having met in the office, Yoonga wished Henim a good morning. Coming closer, the assistant reminded him of yesterday's request. He said that he found the guy and did everything as the boss ordered. The man hesitated but still decided to ask a question about last night. But their conversation was interrupted by the elevator opening. A charming brunette fluttered out of it. Manager Song Hae-en assured that if she had known that President Yoonga would be here, she would have definitely stayed late. The giggling coquette said that coffee, like alcohol, tasted better if you drank it in pleasant company. But her phrase did not have the desired effect. Chon Yoonga's face was stony. The girl shuddered when she encountered such cold. And, stuttering a little, she hurried to say goodbye, wishing the president a good morning. In the elevator, the brunette asked the guy's name. Their faces were gloomy but reserved. The chairman was informed about the visit of President Chung Jung. Seeing his colleague, the man invited him to come in and sit down. He was just drinking his morning tea. The brunette sat down on the sofa next to him and said that they had been seeing each other often lately, despite being busy. There was a framed family photo on the table. The chairman said that his wife had just left, and he assumed that Yoonga might have crossed paths with her. The gray-haired man asked the young man his opinion about Director Choi's daughter, and he said, smiling, that he had arranged everything. But still, the conversation was about the future wife. She should be to her husband's liking. Chairman Kwon always considered Young-hae as his son. And suddenly he did something ridiculous. Because of Song Ha-yeon, his new wife. One rainy evening, the man told Yoonga that it was time for him to get married, and he blamed himself for not paying attention to it for so long. After all, the one who would be waiting for him at home should have appeared by now. Yoonga lit his cigarette. The elder assured him that this was why he had arranged the meeting. The chairman recalled that dinner, and emphasized that Director Choi was able to maintain his power through investment shares, and he can be useful by being on their side. The elder asked Yoonga his opinion on what had been said. The brunette chose to remain silent. Love. Feelings that separate like dust. He would never have thought that there would be such a hidden variable in all this. Yoonga thought that mixing souls, not bodies, was far more dangerous than he had thought. It was so much so that even the heartless chairman went limp. And this little thing changed the man he considered all-powerful and unbending so much. The secretary asked if the gentleman would like another cup of coffee. The boss said that was a great idea. He offered Yoonga some as well, and assured him that his wife had given him these coffee beans. Their aroma was incredible in his opinion. The brunette said that he had recently received a call from Japan, and they wanted him to take on the completion of the PF project. The boss allowed him to do as he saw fit. The cafe employee noticed that the owner was a bit pale today, and she assumed that she had drunk too much alcohol yesterday. Jumi briefly confirmed this. The brunette noticed that she was already on her third cup of espresso, and offered to make a cup of hot tea with lemon. Our heroine clutched her head and frowned. She realized that she had overindulged the previous night and remembered the night only in snatches. But she knew for sure that she had spent time with that man, Chon Jung. The girl shuddered as she recalled the details, and she told herself that she had simply gone crazy. She scolded herself that no matter how much alcohol she had drunk, it was unacceptable to do this with a man she barely knew. The employee, seeing the bright color of her face, assumed that Miss Jumi had a fever. The owner denied the illness but thanked her for the tea. A colleague asked about the man, like the strange behavior of a regular customer of their cafe, and reported that today he was not there. Our heroine assumed with horror that Chon Young-gae could have been involved in this. After all, the man had risen to a solid level in the gangster organization and could have sorted everything out perfectly. Turning the cup in her hands, the girl began to doubt whether she had done the right thing. She had the feeling that she had gotten herself into more serious trouble by trying to get rid of the stalker. Jumi began to convince herself that it was just a one-night stand. The problem was that it was her first experience of this kind, but she was sure that for that man it meant nothing at all. Fortunately or unfortunately, the girl remembered that night in fragments, and so she decided to consider it a mistake, and that's all. The bell announced that the cafe doors had opened. A friend came in and greeted Jumi with a cheerful smile. Henson asked her how she had managed to lose so much weight, and jokingly suggested that she had been working out all night. She wondered who she could have been spending time with to get so drunk. The girl laughed and asked not to say that they had also spent the night together, and Jumi decided that she needed another cup of coffee. Henson asked if everything was okay with her friend, and why she couldn't get through to her. The girl hesitantly said that her mobile screen was broken. The brunette said that this was not the first time something like this had happened when Jumi got drunk. By the way, a friend told me that there was a rumor that Sunbae had married Cho Yumi because he got pregnant. Our heroine knew that all the rush with the wedding was suspicious from the very beginning. After all, there was a certain order to marriage. First the wedding, then the pregnancy. Henson asked if everything was really all right with her friend. She was already beginning to regret that she had raised this painful topic for Jumi, and she was worried about her unusual pallor. The girl assured him that everything was fine. She thought that she shouldn't have been so cautious about this topic, but she also had no right to say what a hot night she had spent. A friend suggested going somewhere together so that Jumi wouldn't get sour. There was a need to pick out a gift for the newlyweds, and Jumi had an incredible sense for everything useful in the interior. Our heroine replied that she would no longer give in to persuasion, but Henson did not back down and asked not to be so stubborn. Telling the customer that she could start using the mobile device right away, Jumi took the new phone in her hands and thanked the salesperson. Henson saw her friend and asked if she had already changed her phone. She confirmed, and added that it was faster than she expected. The brunette offered to have dinner and promised to pay, but Jumi refused, and she said that it was better for her to go home. 5 cups of coffee were taking their toll. Her friend understood everything and already regretted that she had pulled her out, since she was feeling bad. The brunette asked her friend not to apologize. After all, thanks to her, she managed to unwind a little, and she asked if she had someone to spend the evening with. The girl, blushing, confirmed, and thanked him for the time spent. Having said goodbye, Henson was already calling the guy. Our heroine noticed that her friend's eyes were shining with happiness, and she assumed that it was because of the upcoming wedding. The surprising thing was that Jumi suddenly didn't want to go home. She looked at the screen of the phone in her hands. She found the number of President Chung Young-gae. The girl felt uncomfortable around him, but she decided to treat him to dinner somehow as a token of gratitude. After all, he had helped a lot. Last night, Jumi was so scared that her legs were shaking, but as soon as she saw Jung Young-ye, she immediately felt safe, as if he was the only place for her to hide. She didn't want to think about it now, but as soon as she remembered what she had done while drunk, she felt the urge to apologize. The girl had the idea of moving. After all this happened because of the psycho who started stalking her. Then, a few meters from our heroine, the car door swung open. Soon one of the gangster's thugs came out of the car and bowed his head to our heroine. The girl recoiled in fear, or perhaps from surprise. She swallowed nervously and asked if her father had sent him, but he said that he had come here on instructions from President Young-gae. The girl was surprised that he could decide that because of one night, and she asked out loud what business. The thug silently went to the trunk and opened it. What appeared before Jumi's eyes horrified her. There lay a naked guy covered in bruises, and his glasses were lying right there. The girl shook with fear. She closed her mouth, holding back a scream. The brunette in the trunk mumbled something inarticulate. Our heroine froze on the spot, recognizing in this guy a stalker who had recently been following her everywhere. Because of his condition, she did not immediately recognize him. The girl instinctively recoiled from the open trunk of the car. The thug said that the man who was in the cafe and bar, and then in the restaurant. He was also at Yumi's villa last night according to the surveillance cameras. And it was President Yoonga's order to bring him here for personal confirmation. The victim of the persecution turned away. It turned out that Yoonga wanted to be completely sure before dealing with him. But the girl was not sure that there was a need to beat the man like that. The gangster's assistant slammed the trunk shut and said that he would consider that they had given him permission to deal with that guy at their discretion. But Jumi asked him to stop. The girl asked with apprehension whether they were going to kill that guy. The thug couldn't say for sure. He assured that President Yoonga would make the decision himself. And saying a short farewell to Miss, he disappeared into the car. The car, its engine purring, quickly drove away. And our heroine was left standing in the middle of the street, confused. She couldn't understand why President Yoonga was doing this. Then her head suddenly started to hurt and the girl tried to cope with the unpleasant feeling that had come over her. Jumi started flipping through the phone book, looking for Jung Yoon-gai's number. She told herself that she never thought that she would be the first to call him about something like this. An incoming call rang on the smartphone. Choi Jumi's number appeared on the screen. President Yoonga answered. The subscriber introduced herself, and nervously she immediately got down to the problem. But due to emotions, she was unable to fully formulate the thought after several attempts. The brunette began to get irritated by this. He coldly ordered to get down to business, stating that he was busy at the moment. Jumi, being extremely worried, asked if they were going to kill the man who was following her. The gangster asked if that was why the girl asked him for help. The miss screamed that this was not right. Having another headache as soon as she remembered the beaten guy in the trunk, the girl said that she had not approached him for this reason. She assured him that she had made a mistake. Clenching her fists in rage, Jumi told the gangster that if she had known how things would turn out, she would not have turned to him for help. And since everything happened because of her fault, or rather because of her request, therefore, but Yoonga, without listening to her, rudely interrupted her, and he asked if Jumi would really tell that scoundrel the same thing, as if she herself was to blame for everything. The girl began to assure that she had not meant it at all. The gangster asked why it was necessary to complicate things so much if it was possible to figure everything out easily. Smiling, Yoonga summed up that she herself did not want to get her hands dirty. But at the same time she felt remorse when others suffered because of her. He asked Choi Jumi to assess the extent of her selfishness. Our heroine couldn't find anything to say in response. The president suggested thinking it over carefully and coming in person. He hung up without saying goodbye. The girl called herself a hypocrite. After all, everything that came out of her mouth was nothing more than empty falsehood. And Choi Jumi considered herself a cowardly person. The sky was already generously strewn with stars when our heroine returned home. After the code was entered, the lock opened automatically, making a characteristic sound. A strip of light through the gap that appeared fell on the floor of the apartment. The girl immediately closed the door upon entering. She hung her head and sat down on the floor right on the threshold. She didn't want things to turn out like this, and she felt herself sinking deeper and deeper into the quagmire. The room was a mess after yesterday. Things scattered around, empty bottles of alcohol and dirty glasses, spilled wine on the floor. The girl got up and decided that she didn't have time to kill herself. She needed to at least tidy up her home. Soon things were in their places, and the apartment acquired a lived-in look and sparkled with cleanliness. An empty wine bottle rolled out from under the sofa. Jumi picked it up and was overcome with memories of the details of the previous night. The color flooded her face. The girl reproached herself for how she could have behaved so indecently with that man. She considered it unfair that she clearly remembered her chaotic appearance. But his mask of calm falling from his face was blurred in her memory. Choi Jumi wondered how far she was willing to go, and wondered if she was really asking for that much. All she wanted was to live like everyone else, peacefully. At school, classmates spread rumors about Choi Jumi, that her father was a gangster. The girls told her to her face that she was rich, and it was clear where all the money came from, and that only selfish scum hung around her. And she got it from the guys too. Sometimes they would throw a football at her as if by accident, and then, smiling happily, apologize and say that they didn't notice her. That's why the girl tried to avoid the company of school children and kids in the yard, not making friends with anyone in particular. And seeing the beaten guy passing by, the girls started whispering that it was he who hit Choi Jumi with a ball yesterday. And they assumed that it was the work of her father, a crime boss. Her classmates didn't hang out with the girl because of this. They were scared. They could get beaten up if they touched her. And they thought that they could only ruin their lives with such communication. That's why Choi Jumi was always noisy but lonely. After all, everyone saw her not as a person, but as a bandit's daughter. But nothing has changed since then. And our heroine wanted to live a simple life. Fall in love calmly. Get married, have children, and live happily. The girl sat down tiredly on the sofa and sighed heavily. She wanted a fate where everything was predetermined, but one where the choice would remain hers and the future would be created by her hands. The phone was ringing. It was an incoming call from Tae-ju. Jumi didn't immediately remember who it was, but when she answered, she recognized the young man by his voice. It was the son of the hospital's head doctor. The boy smiled, happy to meet them. His eyes shone with delight. Jumi greeted him back, apologizing for not writing to him immediately after the meeting. Tae-ju suggested that Miss might be busy and asked if he was distracting her too much. But the girl assured him that she was just about to contact him to have a serious talk. Jumi admitted that she came to the meeting at the request of her mother, and at that moment she was not seriously thinking about marriage. The girl realized that her mother would not have been able to insist on her position and the candidate for son-in-law anyway. After all, at all times, the last word was always his. The young man assured that he understood her perfectly, but nevertheless he considered it right to end any relationship after hearing the reason personally. Jumi assured him that she understood his position, and she suggested that he tell his parents that Tae-ju had rejected her, and that would not be a lie. The young man said that he called her to arrange the next date, and was refused. Miss said that at these words she began to feel guilty, and offered to pay for the food. Tae-ju asked if the girl felt sorry for him, but she replied that she had no right to do so. Jumi insisted that she was there to avoid similar problems in the future. After all, her mother could have made another appointment without her knowledge. The young man admitted that her mother had already called. She was curious about how the date had gone that time, and she complained that her daughter hadn't told her anything. Jumi assured him that their possible union would only be a marriage of convenience, and asked him if he wanted to get married himself. Suddenly, our heroine remembered that Chong Yoonga had asked her the same rude question, and surprised at herself, she embarrassedly asked her interlocutor to forget what she had just said. But Tae-ju said that everything was the same for him. He graduated from medical school at his father's behest, and also at the family's wish, he became a doctor in order to run a hospital in the future. All hopes were placed on him as the eldest son. Jumi's father had power and wealth, which was what Tae-ju's family had counted on. Therefore, the young man was not particularly happy about the blind date that his parents had arranged for him. He was sure that if only one side was honest, the other would feel like a coward for keeping quiet. And sometimes all these expectations from loved ones caused a crushing feeling in the chest. This revelation left our heroine speechless for a while. After recovering from it, she insisted that it was too late to talk about it now. Jumi insisted that the young man seemed like a good person to her. He said that an honest conversation was much preferable to tears and lies. But it was hard to predict the future, and it could be that Mrs. Opinion would change and they would meet again. The girl froze, not bringing the fork with food to her mouth. Tae-ju laughed merrily, seeing her reaction, and assured that he certainly wouldn't let her go so easily the third time. The interlocutor asked if he was making fun of her now. The answer was negative. The young man noticed that Jumi did not drink wine, and he voiced the observation that she never touched the glass. The flushed girl assured that she would like to abstain from alcohol for some time. Already when they parted on the street, the guy offered to give Jumi a ride in his car. But she suggested that they part there, and so that the young man would not insist, she said that she wanted to stop somewhere on the way. Without delaying any longer, our heroine resolutely walked away, her heels clicking rhythmically along the road. Usan was the corporation that our heroine's father worked so hard to make successful, and at the same time the organization headed by Chung Jung. Jumi had never come here on her own initiative, and she would never have thought that this would be the reason. The girl was surprised by the size of this building. The problem with the stalker and what happened that night haunted our heroine. She decided to find out something for sure. At the reception, the girl was asked about what she had come for. Jumi assured that she wanted to meet the president. The brunette wondered if she had an appointed time. After all, the security was forbidden to let in unknown people. The security guard who came up asked the miss quite aggressively, and asked the lady why she had come without warning. Jumi assured that it just so happened that she arrived without warning, and insisting on meeting the president, she asked to be taken to him. The employee asked to follow him. Walking past the thugs, Jumi, accompanied by an employee, couldn't help but shudder in fear. It was the first time she had found herself in the world where her father and Jang Yoongae lived. Here death was always close. That's why for the girl such a future was always so distant. She involuntarily trembled with her whole body. The escort, seeing the lady's condition, asked if everything was okay with her, and was worried about her sudden pallor. Jumi asked not to tell her father about this visit, and she assured that she simply wanted to meet with Chung Jung. The president was informed that Miss Choi Jumi had come to see him. The girl stood hesitantly at the threshold. The gangster was sitting in his office at a table with business papers. He didn't even turn his head towards the woman who entered, continuing to do his own thing. Our heroine, who had not waited for a greeting or an invitation to enter, took the initiative into her own hands. She resolutely approached Chon Yoonga's desk and asked if the one who had been chasing her had been killed. The brunette glared at Jumi from under his furrowed brows and asked if she had really come here to make a scene. He asked her to continue. The girl assured that the president was right, and she expected something like this to happen. But at that moment she was scared, so she asked him for help. But still she didn't want anyone to die because of her, even if it was hypocritical. And abruptly changing the subject, our heroine decided to ask the president if he had used protection that night. He only grinned silently in response. The girl insisted on a clear answer. But having achieved only a malicious smile, Jumi involuntarily shuddered. Our heroine stated that after that she checked the trash can, but found no traces of barrier contraceptives there. After all, there should have been at least 5 or 6 of them there. But even though it was a sudden intimacy, it was necessary to be more careful. To this, Yoonga stated that he had acted solely at her request several times. Jumi asked again about the quantity. The gangster clicked his lighter and lit a cigarette. He replied that his partner should have guessed everything in the morning if she had been at least a little observant. The girl blushed, and Yoonga, seeing her embarrassment, began to tell about the details and caresses with his tongue. Our heroine told herself that she needed to calm down, and she assured her partner that she was taking contraceptive pills. She asked President Yoonga to consider everything that happened last night as a normal one-night stand. It was just sex without any meaning. After all, both were drunk and out of their minds. Jumi suggested not to attach importance to such things, and she thought that he was an intelligent man and should have understood her intentions. The gangster expressed doubts about her sincerity. After all, it was strange how the girl so stubbornly denied what had happened. He hissed monotonously as he put out his cigarette. Yoonga asked if she imagined another man during their intimacy. Our heroine was taken aback by this. In truth, at first she compared her partner to Jang Hyun Sunbae, but she imagined him only for a moment, and she never had fantasies about another partner during intimacy with a man, and it seemed impossible that Yoonga would know about it. It seemed to Yumi that the partner could hardly penetrate the consciousness. The gangster chuckled and made a vulgar joke about the impossibility of confusing him with anyone else due to the size of his body parts. The girl was indignant that Yoonga could even talk about such a thing. After all, she clearly remembered calling him by name during the climax. It seemed to our heroine that the more she talked to this man, the more she sank into the quagmire. Jumi realized that this conversation should be ended before she caused more trouble, and she began to summarize. But her interlocutor interrupted her mid-sentence. Yoonga assured her that he didn't care who was in her head last night, especially since it was just a one-night stand, and he ordered her to leave. Our heroine called him names in her mind, but her facial expression gave it all away. She left with her foot opening the door to his office. The girl was walking with long strides from President Chung Young's office when a ringtone sounded in her bag. Glancing at the screen, Jumi realized that it was her father calling her. She took the call, and was surprised that the information reached him so quickly. The daughter assured that there was a need to meet with President Yoonga, and now she was just about to stop by her parents' house and discuss something important with both of them. And she asked if her mother was home. After turning off the call, Jumi sighed heavily. She was tired. After all, everything continued to go the way she least wanted. There was an understanding that the easiest thing to do was to give up. After all, little could change. That's why she left the date without thinking twice. After all, no matter what, in the end, everything will be exactly as the parents want it. And they considered their only child a source of pride. The mother built Jumi's life as if it were her own, and she always wanted to proudly marry her daughter into a good family. But her own will had no meaning in the picture of the future that her mother saw. A security guard from the corporation offered to give Miss Choi a ride home. At any other time she would have refused, but today she was so tired that she agreed with a short thank you. The elevator arrived. An automated voice from the speaker announced, "The doors are opening." The man said that she was late. Jumi recognized the voice and glanced to the side. President Yoonga stood next to her, also waiting for the elevator. The girl did not expect this and was surprised. And when the booth opened, the brunette was the first to enter. And after him, his numerous guards of thugs. Jumi told herself that she needed to calm down and control herself. Otherwise, she would lose. The brunette, who was the last one to enter the elevator cabin, said that thanks to someone she now had things to do. And she was forced to go where she didn't want to go at all. Yoonga asked with a laugh if the girl was always so bold. She replied that this case was an exception. Jumi said that today the president did not have to take her, since there was already someone to do it. An automated voice announced, "The doors are opening." The girl asked permission to leave first. Walking with long strides through the lobby, our heroine silently wished to never see this man again in her life. Meeting him brought only chaos. But Jumi still couldn't understand why she felt so bad. The girl froze in place as if struck by lightning. She suddenly had a bad feeling. The mere thought of meeting this arrogant and ignorant man caused her to feel sharp emotions, burning her heart so much that it filled her with fear. And the girl's intuition told her how terrible this situation was. President Yoonga's car sped along the road at high speed. Fine and sparse snow was flying by. Director Woo Sung-jung smiled to himself. The driver found it strange to see his boss in such a state. He unconsciously uttered Choi Jumi's name. And it was no wonder, because all his thoughts were only about that passionate night. He believed that he had made a mistake, and he shouldn't have succumbed to the charms of a drunk and unaware girl. An uncharacteristic mistake had been made with unzipping his pants. Yoonga then lost control of himself from the pleasant swaying of his hips and passionate caresses. Now the brunette regretted that he had made a mistake, but at the same time he did not consider it as such. He admitted to himself that he had acted impulsively then, and that being drunk he had lost the ability to reason and control himself. The brunette clenched his fists at the realization of this. Yoonga saw a problem with this, and what particularly infuriated him was that he had lost his sobriety of mind that night, which was not at all typical. After all, even when drunk, he never lost his composure. And Jumi gave in so easily, and it wasn't even funny. After all, everything had gone wrong since that day. He remembered how the girl's father had fussed at the table, hitting on Chairman Kwon. Director Choi was delighted that the chairman had personally organized this meeting and booked such a stunning venue. Then the men began to discuss future business projects and the construction of Hangang. But this already seemed boring to Yoonga. The man recalled the conversation the day before. The chairman had told Yoonga about the need to settle down and find a suitable partner. But looking at the girl opposite him, nothing about her attracted him. And the stone face and eyes of a dead fish only discouraged the desire that was not there at all. It was surprising that during the feast the young girl's expression did not change at all. It was immediately clear that she was Director Choi's daughter. The chairman then assured that the daughter was just like Mrs. Choi, and was therefore an enviable beauty. And he thought it was a good idea for her to become friends with his wife. Jumi said she had a bad character. That's why she doubted she could get along with her. The interlocutor said that she was so calm and beautiful, and asked what could be terrible about her. The girl said that her father was constantly joking that she was arrogant and immodest. The chairman laughed and replied that he had noticed how difficult his interlocutor was, and her father was angry. But the organizer of the meeting asked his colleague to leave, and he believed that young people should be able to show their claws. Yoonga couldn't understand whether it was fearlessness or indifference, but looking at the girl he assumed that it could be both at the same time. Her quiet and measured gestures were strangely imprinted in the memory of the young gangster. It was already late in the evening when there was an incoming call on the phone. The name of the subscriber appeared on the screen. The brunette answered Chol-ju. Told the president that Choi Jumi, with whom he had an appointment, was still waiting for him at the table. And 2 whole hours had passed since the appointed time. Yoonga was a little puzzled and confused about what to do. He had hoped that the girl would understand everything and leave without waiting for him. And our heroine sat sadly, her head down, indifferently looking at her reflection in a cup of tea. The young gangster stood for a while and simply watched his potential bride. He wondered whether the girl's action was stupid stubbornness or a wise decision. Then Choi Jumi's smartphone vibrated and almost immediately rang as a ringtone on the table. The girl answered the call. It was her friend Haesong. She asked if her friend would come to Sunbae's wedding. She said yes, and assured him that she was fine. Then she said that she was on a date. Jumi assured that her chosen one was more handsome and wealthier than Young-hyun Sunbae, and with good manners to boot. And everything went well and smoothly. The girl told her friend not to worry. After all, she had high standards and there was no awkward silence between them. Yoonga smiled. He was just going to leave, but at the last moment he changed his mind after that call, and he resolutely approached Miss, who was waiting for him. Our heroine realized from the massive shadow hanging over her that she was no longer alone, and after briefly saying goodbye to her friend, she soon turned off the call. Looking back, Yoonga admitted that this was his first mistake, that he didn't leave but turned to Yumi and approached. The girl looked either confused or scared, and she begged him to stay with her until she finished the bottle. She, who had always seemed like a wax doll, opened up and showed her true self. Jumi assured the gangster that it was because of her fear, and at that moment, curiosity ignited in the man. He squeezed the wine bottle and poured wine into her glass, and he wanted to see the girl completely broken. He wanted to tear the artificial shell and lay her insides at his feet. More precisely, Chon Yoonga did not expect to have sex with a girl at all, and it was a gross mistake. But at that moment he could no longer control his attraction. Another mistake that wasn't a wrong move, the one that made him unzip his fly. It was unclear why Jumi was so drunk. She drank glass after glass as if she would die if she didn't drink. The young gangster tried to understand what the beauty was so desperately trying to forget. Here he remembered that telephone conversation between the girl and her friend, which did not quite correspond to reality, and was more like bragging or a screen. When Jumi caressed him, the man was confused, and he didn't know what to do because he wasn't her Jong-hyun Sunbae. Yoonga suddenly became curious about what kind of man he was, who could drive a closed and cold woman crazy. He wondered if he had gone crazy. The gangster remembered the Mrs. eyes filled with tears when he told her that everything had been according to her wishes, and several times. The assistant brought Yoonga out of his thoughts and asked if everything was okay with him. Hanim turned to the window and replied that not quite. He irritably asked not to ask him stupid questions and not to add fuel to the fire. At that moment, the man felt awkward that he was the only one who remembered all the details of what had happened that night. The car was racing down the road at high speed, its engine purring. Starry sky. The light was burning softly in all the windows. In the evening, the door opened in the house, and from the threshold, the girl announced her arrival to her parents. The woman reproached her for rarely visiting her daughter. And even if we refer to business, everyone was doing something. And at the same time, even in a tiny cafe, it was almost impossible to meet Jumi. The girl asked not to take up the old ways. The mother said that raising children was simply unbearable for this reason, and she assured that she and the father wished the best for her, and the son of the hospital director Henson. The daughter demanded that she not be pressured. The woman suspected that she had recently had a fight with someone and was now taking her anger out on her family. And looking at her appraisingly, she asked if Jumi went for massages. The father had just come down the stairs. He looked like he had just taken a shower. He asked if the sky would fall if his daughter ever came home. The man reproached her for abandoning her only relatives. She left home to run some eatery. Jumi replied that it was not a diner or a coffee shop in the middle of nowhere, but her cafe. Abruptly changing the subject, her father asked dryly why she had come to the company today. The girl replied that she had gone on a date with a man her father had proposed to her, and there was nothing strange about wanting to meet and talk to this man again. The man thought it was strange that she decided to do this now, although there had been no signs of their communication before. And he admitted that he suspected that she didn't like her partner. Jumi thought that her father was very observant and it was quite difficult to deceive him. She asked since when her dislike for a person was enough to end a relationship. The daughter said that she had come today specifically to tell her parents something, and she claimed that she would not meet with either the hospital director's son or President Yusun. The girl said that she had her own business now, a cafe, and even under pressure she would not give in. The work brought her enough money, and so she asked to respect her choice. The man held a glass of alcoholic drink with ice in his hands. He laughed when he heard his daughter's speech, and then he exploded with rage, asking how long she was going to play barista. After all, Jumi was simply asked to marry well and forget about money for the rest of her life. His wife began to calm him down, and she assured him in a conciliatory tone that her daughter understood everything, and there was no need to shout like that. She hoped that her daughter would think about it and draw the right conclusions for herself. Father said that Chon Young-gae was, in his opinion, a heartless and calculating person, and he would not treat just anyone so politely. After all, such people did not throw away tenderness. Jumi knew that this was the kind of person his father liked. He didn't have an ounce of humanity. He worked hard and earned even more. The head of the family announced that as soon as Jung returned from his business trip, they would hold the opening of the hotel. And she already announced that Jumi would also be there. The girl stood up and got ready to go home. She said that she would not be coming here anytime soon. She also refused to go to meetings for the sake of marriage, and she thought to herself that it would have been better if they had had an abortion, since they wanted a son. And already moving towards the exit, without turning around, she declared that she was also finished with the hospital director's son. The mother screamed in frustration, but the daughter was already opening the front door with a creak. Already on the street, our heroine thought that her parents' words were quite true, and everything she ever had was given to her by her father. And even this man, who willingly volunteered to be her driver today, was her dad's subordinate. And he invited the lady to get into the car, opening the door for her. Jumi thanked the driver. She thought that since she had everything thanks to her father, she had to follow his will. And suddenly she felt so pathetic that she was afraid to stand on her own feet without her parents' support. Our heroine told the driver to go. He fulfilled the lady's will. The girl thought sadly that she would not be able to come to her father's house for some time, until she learned to stand proudly on her feet. It was snowing that evening. Lonely passers-by, or more rarely couples, hurried to take shelter at home. The cafe hall was completely empty. The employee of the establishment was surprised that there had not been a single guest all day. And she admitted that it was because it was a working day. Jumi agreed that this could be the case. And then came the suggestion to have a cup of coffee and then go home. Inko, the young man who worked third on their shift, supported, and asked what to do for whom. The manager asked to make her a lemon drink with ice. Our heroine sighed heavily. She thought that Jung Young-gae was currently on a business trip, and maybe that's why it had been so quiet lately. But then the bell rang, announcing the arrival of late guests in the cafe. The lady entered, clicking her heels. Jumi greeted the guest, who approached the cash register in the standard manner. The lady took off her dark glasses, looking appraisingly at the cafe manager. Our heroine helpfully asked what the cafe guest wanted to order. The brunette turned her head away from her, looking at the interior of the establishment. Then she glared at Jumi. The girl felt awkward under her gaze. The lady ordered 1 espresso. The order was accepted, and our heroine got down to business. She had the feeling that the guest was nagging her with her eyes, and the brunette, waiting for her order, sat expectantly in the corner of the room. For a regular guest of this cafe, she was expensively dressed. Having waited for her coffee, the guest slowly sipped it, sip after sip, but she kept her eyes on Jumi. Our heroine noticed this and became wary. Inko asked the director if she knew that lady. She denied it. The waitress approached and asked if the cafe guest wanted anything else. She refused. It was strange for Jumi to see such a type in her establishment. It was enough to glance at her to see an expensive branded bag, shoes. The lonely cafe guest didn't look like someone who would travel to the outskirts of town for a cup of coffee. Her thoughts were interrupted by Inho, who, judging by the sound, had broken something. The manager worriedly asked if her employee was safe. He apologized for the mistake and picked up the pieces. Jumi noticed that the young man had cut himself. She asked him not to apologize but to take care of his wound. Meanwhile, the waitress approached the only guest, asked for forgiveness, and informed that the cafe would be closing soon. The lady stood up, pushed back her chair, and thanked for the coffee. The employee said goodbye to the client, and soon she left, which was announced by the bell at the door. The waitress asked if the guest was going to buy a franchise from them. She noticed how confidently she walked in, as if she was going to buy the whole building right then and there. But Jumi didn't comment on it. The girl suggested that the director have dinner and a drink today. Inko supported her, but our heroine said that she had recently given up drinking alcohol, and she offered to take her card and make an order with it. Jumi insisted that the alcohol and food usually tasted better when the boss was absent from the corporate party. But then she staggered and screamed. Colleagues rushed to the director's aid. The waitress Ju suggested that she was anemic, But the director assured her that she was fine and just dizzy. Making an effort, Jumi smiled and assured her colleagues that she was fine. Soon a couple of hired employees of the cafe left. The door creaked and closed behind them, and our heroine sat down tiredly in the hall on the nearest chair. Jumi felt strange. Her whole body had been aching lately. She assumed it could be the result of stress or a cold. The girl sat with her head down for a while, but then a thought struck her like a bolt of lightning. The brunette even jumped up from her seat. She tried to calm herself down, that this couldn't have happened. And it was strange that the details of the night spent with that man were popping up in her head. Jumi went to the toilet. The darkness covered her head. She sat and read the instructions that came with the test strip. She dropped a drop into the window and waited with a shudder for the recommended exposure. Her hands began to shake when a clear second line appeared before the allotted time. This was already the third test. The girl took 3 from different manufacturers to be sure, and they all showed the same result. Jumi didn't know what to do now. It was clear that she should go to the hospital first, and for that she needed to make an appointment with a doctor and check the accuracy of these tests. The girl instinctively touched her stomach, and she thought that if she really was pregnant, there was only one option: to get rid of the child. She believed that the life that was born from the connection that night without the love of a father would never become a desired child. Our heroine sat in the toilet with her head down, lost in thought about what she should do now. A message from her father arrived on Jumi's device. He reminded her that the hotel would be opening this week. He asked his daughter not to be late for the event, and he said that if she so wanted to live her own way, then she should have convinced her family that she was capable of being independent. He considered empty complaints to be childish stupidity. On the evening of the hotel's opening, it was snowing. The building's windows glowed with a soft light. Cars drove up, dropping off the next guest of the event, and immediately gave way to the next one. The hall where our heroine entered was quite crowded and noisy, but she was immediately recognized. The guy was surprised that such a snowfall happened on the opening day, and he assured her that he was waiting for her to convey the words of the executive director. He noticed Miss Choi's paleness and asked her about her health. The girl replied that she had simply not been sleeping well lately. The doctor had previously explained to Jumi that if she did not take the pills on time, the effect could be reduced. She assured that no drug provides a 100% guarantee of contraception. Our heroine herself knew that no product could guarantee complete protection. The night before, she had spent the whole night searching for information about it, and she was comforted by the fact that there had been quite a few such cases. Jumi stayed up all night watching videos about early pregnancy symptoms such as nausea and dizziness. The young man reported that by order of the director, he was responsible for escorting Miss Choi Jumi to her private room, and he offered to carry her things there. The girl simply demanded that he give her the key, and she wanted to take her things herself. The hotel employee was surprised that she did not plan to be present at the ribbon cutting. Jumi assured that she was not eager. After all, no one was waiting for her there anyway, and she believed that she did not need to be patronized. She recommended the guy to return to his duties. And in the lobby, the final preparations were being made. The staff were bustling about and trying to bring something to perfection in the last minutes. The girl looked at her feet. She herself could not understand the reason why today, instead of her usual heels, she decided to wear ballet flats. The staff was making noise and noise. They all looked busy. So Jumi decided to go to her room to rest for now. But then a tall brunette in a black suit approached her. Raising her head, the girl recognized Chon Yoonga. The girl greeted the president shyly. She said that she had heard about his trip to Japan, and she assumed that the deal had been completed successfully. Jumi remembered their conversation in the office. She had come then to get an answer, and she had heard what she wanted. Now the situation had changed, but the very thought of asking him to take responsibility was hateful. After all, if Chon Yoonga finds out, he will probably tell you to get rid of the child and maybe even take you to the clinic. It was enough to look at him to predict the reaction. The girl greeted him at the opening ceremony and turned away, about to leave, but he called her by name. Touching Chon Young's shoulder and leaning towards her, he suggested that the elevator was on the other side. Already riding in the cab, the young gangster noticed that Choi Jumi was wearing low-heeled shoes. The girl, feeling discomfort, grabbed her head and staggered. She thought that she might have been feeling dizzy lately due to lack of sleep, but she couldn't control herself and fell. Luckily, Chon Yoonga managed to catch her. He grabbed her shoulders and asked if she was in herself and if she had eaten enough and on time. This tight embrace brought back memories of that night. The man was still the same. This chaos had only changed her. The girl assumed that he himself ate well, and she reminded him how he put out his cigarettes in a lobster instead of an ashtray. She looked Yoonga in the eyes with a challenge. Jumi assured that she had eaten well. Therefore, there was no need to worry about her. She apologized for her irritability and asked for understanding. The gangster suggested that she stop being rude if she wanted understanding, and he asked where the guy who was assigned to her had gone, that now she was wandering alone. The girl replied that it was not far. Yoonga noticed that even so, she was still lost and could not go without an escort. Our heroine was surprised by his concern. After all, he was not in the habit of worrying about anyone. The brunette said that her room was number 803. The girl took hold of the handle and creaked the door open. And Yoonga, accompanied by 3 guards, was already walking away down the corridor, animatedly discussing something. Choi Jumi thought with a certain sadness or envy that everything was fine with him as always. Unlike her, the room was minimalist in design. The girl sat on the edge of the bed facing the wall-sized window, which offered a beautiful view of the evening lights of the city. Then the phone vibrated in her bag. Our heroine took out the device, checking who was calling her. It was her father. He was announcing that the CEO's open press conference would soon begin, and he was asking where his daughter had been. The girl assured him that she was tired and had gone up to her room to rest a bit. Jumi was angry that she was not given a minute of peace. She tried to answer something, but her father interrupted her and demanded that she come down immediately. A tribune towered over the stage. The guests were noisy in anticipation of the beginning. From there, the always self-confident Chung Yoonga announced the opening of the press conference. He asked everyone to take their seats. A hotel employee led a young brunette through the crowd of guests. Jumi thought she recognized her. Having taken a place at the podium, the person already familiar to our heroine from her visit to the cafe began her speech. She thanked everyone who honored them with a visit today. Song Hae-young introduced herself to everyone as CEO of Yu-song. Jumi watched the girl closely, recognizing her and not taking her eyes off her. She realized that she was the young wife of Chairman Yusun. And it was not without reason that she came to her coffee shop. She must have found out something. The girl was shaken again, and suddenly nausea rolled over her and her eyes grew dim. She stood up abruptly and hurried out. On the way, she bumped into a man, and quickly asking for forgiveness, she went to the toilet. She covered her mouth with her hand and fought the nausea. The girl threw up in the toilet. Nothing had changed in her life yet. Only an invisible child had been added. But it felt as if her life had been turned upside down. Her body was shaking from exhaustion. Choi Jumi thought that she knew perfectly well how to get out of this situation. Then everything would be like before, without nausea and drowsiness. The girl stood leaning against the nearest wall. She was swaying. From time to time she closed her eyes and the past seemed like a dream to her. But then someone grabbed her by the shoulder from behind. Strong arms grabbed Jumi under the knees. It was him! Yoonga picked up the fragile Miss Choi in his arms and carried her. He saw a tear rolling down the girl's eyes. His question about the reason for the tears was rhetorical, and soon the young man, accompanied by security, carried Jumi along the corridor in his arms. Our heroine realized that she was lying in bed. She stood up abruptly and could not understand where she was. This was not her number at all. The girl remembered being in the toilet and assumed she had passed out there. But before that, she had felt like someone had picked her up. The doorbell rang. Jumi hurried to open it. She was surprised to see Song Hae-en standing at the door. The brunette frowned. She was asking where the owner of the number had gone and what the girl was doing here. Jumi rubbed her neck, which was stiff from sleep, and said that she was a little unwell, and Jung Jung-gae helped her. And she asked the CEO in response what brought her here. Song Hae-en indignantly replied that she had no intention of revealing the reason for the visit to someone who did not concern her. To which the brunette assured that she was alone in the room at the moment. Yumi said that she didn't know what business brought the girl here, but now Yoonga was not in the room. Therefore, she should come later. And turning her back, she began to open the door of the room. Song Hae-en asked to repeat, but our heroine did not continue the dialogue with her and having closed the door from the inside, leaned her back against them. She didn't understand what was happening to that lady. It was as if her man had been taken away from her, and it was unclear why the married lady was so interested in Chung Jung. Yumi scolded herself that she shouldn't have cared about that, and Yoonga's relationship with her stepmother was none of her business. She had no reason to be curious, nor, incidentally, to remain in the room in the absence of its owner. The girl stomped to the door. The lock clicked and she left. But then she ran into Chon Yoonga literally at the threshold. She briefly but sincerely thanked him for his help, and was about to leave. The young gangster called her name. The girl froze and looked back. Yoonga asked if she had forgotten something, and then he handed her the keycard to the room. She couldn't understand how it could have fallen out, and thanking her, she intended to take it from the man's hands. But he made a sharp move ahead of her, not allowing Jumi to even touch the thing. He asked what the girl had done that made her constantly look at the floor and avoid meeting his gaze. Yoonga insisted that everything was written on her face. The interlocutor asked if he had already had dinner, and having expressed regret that she had not given him a chance to rest, she was about to leave. But the brunette did not let them change the subject. Jumi was wondering if he would be able to solve the problem if he knew what it was. The girl assured that she had a cold and nothing more, and she emphasized that he saw her state of hyperthermia. Yoonga asked what drugs she had taken. Miss Choi assured him that they were just fever-reducing pills, but he didn't take her joke. Seizing the opportune moment, our heroine snatched the room key card from his hands and walked away.